The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. If you guys are not familiar with the Agile Alliance, it's a nonprofit organization that has been in existence since the signing of the manifesto. We run somewhere around 13 different initiatives. We are a member-based organization that's focused on pushing this thing called Agile into the mainstream. And I have to say that when I say pushing it into the mainstream is probably the wrong words, because Agile is, some organizations were born to Agile and others are still going through the heat of adoption. And as you guys know, that transformation is never simple. And that's one of the reasons why the Agile Coaching Network came into existence almost 4 years ago. It actually started off in a Fortune 100 company internally, and we brought it out externally to the rest of the world so you guys can be able to take advantage and amplify the learnings. And by the way, if you're new to Agile and you think, oh, I'm new and I can't actually insert myself in here because I'm so new, please do not think that. What you'll find is that your knowledge is absolutely vital to this conversation. Some of us who've been doing Agile development for more than 10 years, sometimes it's a little hard to remember what it was like way back when. So please don't feel that if you don't, if you have something to contribute. Everyone here has something to contribute, so that's good. There was a question that was posted up on our Slack channel, and if you guys don't know about the Slack channel that we have available, if you go up to Agile Alliance or if you go agilecoachingnetwork.org, you can find the Slack channel enrollment, and it'll send you an invite. But one of the questions that was up there is something that we haven't talked about too much in the coaching network, and that is about how does Agile and the quality and testing strategies come together. And we were talking before the podcast went live, and the notion of when we start talking about test, it actually is a really broad topic. And I know we're not going to go fully penetrate all the different ways that we can talk about this. But this picture that for people on the podcast can't see, sometimes I actually had a general manager one time that came out and said that, well, this is a part of how we're going to do our testing strategy in Agile. Picture that's on the screen right now is a person stepping out onto the wheel of an aircraft, and he is repairing his engine while the plane is in flight. And that to me is not a strategy. That to me is a recovery process. That is also too much adrenaline for me to think about. And so when I think of testing, there are a lot of different things that can come into play. And modern testing in particular, whether or not they're deterministic testing or non-deterministic testing, heuristic-based testing, AI-based testing now, traditional test case, unit-level tests, whatever those parameters are, and all the different types of stages that you can go bring together to go verify that a requirement did in fact match the requirement. Did the requirement, was it written correctly? Because when we put the actual functionality in front of somebody, it works as designed, works as a requirement, comes across, it was well documented, but yet it gets in front of the customer and the customer says, no, that isn't what I wanted. So, language and the way that we go put things together. And for those of you who've been in Agile for a long period of time, you know that the methodologies of automated testing, specifically getting into the fact of, potentially writing the test first and making the test the actual way that what we design to. It are other methods and methodologies that can get thrown into the bunch. The last vector in this is, and I've got these pictures of these two tractors, these automated tractors going through some fields, field testing. And I didn't think about this before, but the pun of these two these tractors going through a field. But if you guys are not familiar with companies like John Deere Tractor, a tractor is not just an engine anymore and a driver. Autonomous vehicles that can go off and harvest a field, and that's including both trucks as well as the harvesters. They just go into the field, and the only thing that the person who's driving this is doing is pretty much monitoring it and making sure that it isn't going crazy and maybe the start of a sci-fi movie. Reality is that these things are very complex machines. That complex machines, when you throw all the other things into it, sometimes you're going to have a miss. You're going to have a miss of a requirement. And the way that like John Deere handles some of this and usability and other things is they'll actually put the software developers in the machines, and they go to the field and they watch these things work. So, sort of that bigger extension of methodology is not just I'm going to experience it, what I do in my test bench, but I'm going to also go out into the field and see how it works. And that includes also, say, order systems and other things that might be at a John Deere dealer. All the software back end, all of that's just tested in the field, and it's done by taking the engineers and putting them into the field. And I think that's pretty darn cool. So the kickoff question for this is, what is your Agile quality and testing strategy? If you would like to share that with us, I'd like to hear if it's the same as what we've talked about, or if there's a very specific edge of what you found works really well with your type of product and your company. The next part is, as Agile coaches and Agile leaders, how did you build up this capability in your team? Especially for most of you, we came from a waterfall kind of environment, and getting from a waterfall environment to more of an agile testing methodology was a lot of work. Because frankly, there was a lot of segregation in waterfall teams of those are the developers and those are the testers, and they sit completely in different places or maybe even in different time zones, which slows down the capability of the only way that I communicated with a developer is through a bug report. And that is not a great Agile methodology right there. And then lastly, what help did you need from management, and how did management help to go implement this within your environment? And I noticed that Shauna, you've joined. If you do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ray. So one of the things that I think is really important is just to even start the conversation. So I just ran a workshop, for example, with some of my teams using Lisa Crispin's 4 quadrants on Agile testing. And what I really like about the 4 quadrants is it talks about the different types of testing, especially if you're trying to move your team into whole team testing or getting the developers kind of shifting left and running some of their own automated tests. And so it really helps spark the conversation to help to get the team to understand not just like why testing is important, but what environment should we be running these tests in? Is it happening in QA? Is it happening in development? Who should be running the tests? What are the types of tools that we're using for testing? Do we need training on those tools with the teams? And so I really like turning that exercise, and feel free to look up Lisa Crispin and 4 quadrants, and you should be able to find it pretty easy, into an interactive workshop. Because if you can start the conversation and you can kind of lay out what your testing plan, what your testing strategy is, so that you can get everybody aligned and come up with a plan, then it's much easier to take action on doing things like, hey, if we're going to start getting tactical, let's figure out at what point in the flow we want to execute these tests, or maybe let's build a process in so that we know that it doesn't meet the definition of done until we automate the user story. So you can really start the conversation and get the team aligned. And I think getting everybody on the same page to not just how you want to test, the kinds of tests that you want to run and who's going to run it is really critical.
Cool. Thank you for that. That's some good advice. Hendrik, what do you have?
Yeah, for us, it's a super wide topic, of course. And in our giant company, this has been, of course, evolving over the years. So we of course had also a waterfall kind of thing in the beginning. Pre-Agile, we had a test department with the test engineers, and there would be a handover from the software developers to the test engineers. And with the Agile transformation, we really changed this. We built cross-functional teams, and one cornerstone in that strategy was that we wanted to have the test knowledge, the test skills in the teams. And that worked wonders, I can say. Before the Agile transformation, during Waterfall, we had like quality strategies, which were looking like this. We set up a goal, 10 times better quality. No, actually, the first goal was 3 times better quality. And that was just a goal, figure out how. And well, we did not really manage so well. And because we didn't manage so well, we needed to make it tighter, and we had a 10 times better quality goal. So, and it didn't really work out so well. And the moment we went into an Agile setup with cross-functional teams, with the testing strategy inside the team, all of a sudden everything completely changed. So the number of defects that were slipping out to the customer was reduced from immediately by 50%. And that was beyond any hopes that we had before. So, cross-functional teams as such are already, I think, a very good cornerstone of your Agile testing strategy and your Agile quality strategy.
So sorry? I was just going to ask a question about that, because you're also in a very old company. Did you find that going to cross-functional teams, was that an easy transition or was that a hard transition?
It was easy because we had management buy-in. So this is a bit going to the last question, what did you need from management? We had a management buy-in from the beginning, and that made it easy. So the people on the teams, they were relatively easy going into that new setup. Then of course there was a question, because we're having huge development organizations, so often distributed internationally over different sites and so on. And then there are, of course, I mean, you do your unit tests, you do your integration tests of different components, and then who's owning the integration test? Should there be a central integration test team that is taking the components from everyone? And for example, there from the beginning, our strategy was this needs to be shared, a shared ownership. So we had actually a rotating ownership of this integration thing. So every 3 months, the ownership of this integration would move to another site, and other people would be in charge of it. And that things like this created a huge boost in the quality awareness of people. And this was only possible because the management was really helping and supporting this whole step.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. Linda, I noticed your mic went on. What do you have?
Hi, Ray. Good afternoon, good day, good morning, everyone. One of the things I thought I'd bring up is really testing beyond the team, and that is to encourage folks that when you're building out your test strategies, to not leave your customers out of the game, right? You want to figure out ways to engage with your customers, because after all, those are people you're actually delivering for, to make sure, not only are you doing usability testing, but get the advantage of getting feedback sooner rather than later. Early feedback loops is definitely one of the benefits built into many of the Agile methods and practices. And I just want to encourage everyone to, don't forget about the customer at the end of the day, and make sure that you're incorporating the time, the opportunity, and the environment that you can engage with your customers and provide a positive experience as you're doing testing, and ensure that you're getting good feedback and support.
Very good, very good. Jorg, your mic's on as well.
Yeah, 2 thoughts of this, or let's say experiences. One is actually pretty old and was in my very first company, which did mobile phones and is only around as a brand now. But they did something very smart in field testing. More or less everybody had the phone, and instead of giving detailed test instructions, they gave a path of, I would call it focused randomness. They didn't even have a name for that, but you got instructions what to test, like do SMS internet access plus calls. but they didn't tell you in which order or what was first. And then they recorded all the feedback and all the scenarios, thereby making it pretty much reproducible. And especially the newcomers to the use, like students or young engineers, they always found use cases that the original team had completely missed. So giving that, yes, there's a focus, and this focus is because we failed on this one before, or we did a lot of changes. Extremely helpful, but don't give too detailed instructions. Otherwise, people who at least partially resemble your users will be blindsided to things. And if they've done a test in a certain way 3 times, 4th and 5th times will be exactly the same.
Cool.
And you will not get that randomness.
Well, I love because one of the things that we did in early days of microprocessor testing was random instruction testing and throwing different scenarios in a way that humans, could possibly do, or that, things that we wouldn't think out of the box. And so sort of the, I like the eat your own dog food strategy too, which is, go use this phone
But once it happened that they distributed phone as well to top management and that one couldn't take any incoming calls, that problem got fixed pretty fast.
But I bet overall people were happier.
Yeah.
That was kind of rude. Anyway, thank you for that, Jörg.
I have another one, totally different perspective. Instead of testing the product, test the product assumptions. I did part of my work as product manager, and one of the things was always, we want this new feature and that feature and that feature in that product management team. So when bringing them to Agile, so to act more as product owners and directly talk to the team, I said, if you ask for a feature, tell us, what do you expect? 10% more clicks, 10% more renewal rate, anything, and then let the team figure out how to measure it. And actually, they were totally shocked in the beginning that they needed to make assumptions. And they said, I don't know. Yeah, then make an assumption and learn. And after, I would say, 3 sprints of really painful forcing this more or less to really happen, they suddenly found that was fun, because it was the gamification factor of making the better guess and learning more from the guessing. And that drove the development team to make really interesting ideas what to observe from the customer. And so we learned a lot on behavior. And what I needed there on management was an exception of totally being wrong. If I assume that I get 50% benefit and I only get 5, I don't get punished, but I get to make the next guess. So that was very, very important. Pretty easy because management was sitting directly in the middle of the team and they had to make guesses as well.
Awesome. That's really cool. Thank you for that. Deanna.
Yeah, I just want to add in one small thing. I think the other panelists have covered a lot of this, but in addition to the idea of the cross-functional team, and how different that may be than what we had in a waterfall environment where the quality QA was somewhere different from in the team. Once we bring that into the team as part of our cross-functional team, I think it's important to analyze what are the qualities that we are looking for, and Jörg was just talking about that, but then also what kinds of testing do we need? What part of this do we need to just make automated testing and turn that over to the developers? What other kinds of white or black box testing do we need? What kind of exploratory testing do we want to free up our testing experts to do? Is there business testing and technical testing? I mean, looking at all of as opposed to assuming that on every product and on every team, testing is going to look the same. I feel like I'm duty bound to represent the it depends point of view that we need to tune our testing strategies to fit the work that we're doing. And what you need from management is support for doing that, for understanding that not every team is going to look exactly the same or be completely standardized in those approaches.
Right, and then when those metrics change to, because I found that, test teams and their reporting styles and other things as soon as we went to more of an iterative or we were changing up the test mix, the metrics started to look different. And I know there were some teams that were like massaging data to make it look like the other report versus management meeting them and understanding that, hey, we're reporting this differently now. It's going to look different, which is, I think, incredibly important. So thank you for that. Terrence, are you there? What do you have?
I have found on our testing, the best way to do it is to bring in different people on different cycles. This creates some confusion, some challenges, but really opens up everyone's mind so that they're not fixed in how they are communicating and working with the other people on the team. And I think a couple of the people who have already spoken have gone a little bit down that path.
So yeah, the rotation of your eyes get lazy after a while, I think is what I've seen. And so those fresh eyes do in fact help out quite a bit. So thank you for that. Hector, are you there?
Let me see. Hi there, guys. Listen, I like everything that's being discussed. I just want to mention a couple things that sometimes we assume and we don't really have I'll say a checkpoint. I like to say we need to test for value. Make sure that at each iterative point of your testing that you're trying to figure out if that test or that script that you're running is adding value to your customer, adding value to whatever you're doing. I think that's important. We assume that sometimes, and we don't have that as a checklist that says, hey, are we really testing for value add? Is this really adding value to the solution we're trying to build? The other part is I always like to treat testing as a proof of concept, meaning that the definition for us as a proof of concept is we try to use as much real data as possible, and we try to make sure we have buy-in from a client that says, this is what I do, this is what I run, this is what my environment looks like, this is what could break if you don't do it right. So I try to get that information as much as possible up front before I start getting all these people involved in testing. So someone earlier mentioned test the assumptions. I think that's a good way to say it. And then the last thing is piggybacking on the customer discussion. Make sure that you are actually, if you're going to involve the customer, that they're also kind of signing off on the testing that you're going to do. Can you imagine you do all this testing and the customer says, that's not what we want to do. That's not what we're doing. We already passed that. That's 2 years old. So make sure you get some sign off, some sort of initials that says, even from your testing team, that everybody says, yes, this is what we want to test and this is what's going to produce the outcomes we're looking for. So I wanted just to share that main thing.
Maybe I can feed in one thing here, and that is a great thing that helps us in the telecommunication industry at least, and that's actually ISO standards. So there is an ISO standards where people are discussing what does a good product quality framework look like. And there is the ISO standard 25010, which is looking into quality before the product is shipped to the customer and after the product is shipped to the customer. And this contains a wonderful list of things to consider, like is it maintainable? Is it secure? Is it reliable? How is the user experience? Is it compatible? How is the performance efficiency? How is the functional stability and so on? There is questions about, is it satisfying for the customer? Is it free from risk? Is the context covered? Is it effective and efficient, the product that I'm delivering to the customer? And there's, of course, a lot of descriptions in this standard behind it. But yeah, 25010 for you if you want to check it out. I think this is a great inspiration for thinking about what to cover.
Do that one more. What was the spec?
ISO 25010.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Vanana? Am I getting that correctly? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Yes, you got that. Hi, Ray. So interesting thoughts on testing. And I know testing, agile testing is always kind of, we look at it at different ways. I just wanted some thoughts around, so when we speak about all these different strategies for testing, are there organizations where you have a dedicated testing team, or are these testers included in those cross-functional teams?
I think it's a little bit of both, depending on the type of product that you're doing. I know that when we were doing medical devices or semiconductors that go into medical devices, we needed to do a two-part, which is one part is we did have formatting that was done in our Agile team that was producing the software and firmware. But we also needed an external QA step, and it was purely because of regulatory needs. So that's one situation. I don't know if others have situations where they would create just a standalone team. I think Hendrik talked about it rotating around teams for integration-based test. How about others?
I think one thing that does become a kind of a sticking point in a lot of teams that I worked on is if you want to start moving quality into the teams, how might you create more of that alignment? So if you have cross-functional teams, does that mean that your testers are still reporting into a central QA department, or have you actually made a reporting structure change where they're reporting into the dev leads so that quality and development and everything kind of belong together? And there's really two schools of thought on this. I'd be interested to hear what other people feel about this.
Why don't you make quality just part of definition of done? I mean, the reporting, that's what I've seen in some parts of our company, that we said you need to execute tests and you need to prove that. That's part of the definition of done, and you need to show that your software is working.
So when we say definition of done, what the challenge is sometimes integrated testing lies as a different phase out of this entire development phase. Somehow it doesn't fall into this agile way of thinking, but for whatever reason, they call that integrated testing as a different phase. And I'm sure we are all in that with many of our teams. So that is where trying to get thoughts around how can we get this more kind of collaborated? How do we get this, especially as we're looking into products? Like Agile in product management, should the testers be a part of the product?
Maybe what we have done is, because you have a cross-functional team, the testing capability, the skills, the knowledge is in the team. It's a cross-functional team. But then at some point in time, the software is tested to the extent the team can test it, and they need to be integrated. And that's like the thing that you call the next phase. There's the big integration.
Yep.
And then the question is how to do that. And what we did was, because you don't want to block the team could start working on something else. So what we did was the team can start on something else, but they are not off the hook of the software they have just shipped. So they can start with something else, but if there is a problem coming in from the integration test, the team is still in charge of resolving the problem, number one. Number two, one member of the team is going with the feature into the integration test. So there's always somebody from the team who's with the feature in the integration phase as well.
And I think you said something vital there, which is when something gets, the notion of being thrown over the fence, or the notion of ownership. I know that there are certain software companies today that you own your code for life, meaning that you may move around the company, but if that was your block of code, guess what? You still own that block of code, and you will be brought in to help fix that. There's some that have different degrees of length of ownership, but you just don't get the opportunity to write junk and then have that junk get shipped and then go, oh, I'm not on that project anymore. You don't have that option. So that's always difficult. We have a couple more hands up here real quick. I'm gonna let's see, Sheila.
Yeah, so I had a couple of comments on some of this. So I have always had somebody who on the cross-functional team that was sort of the QA expert. And so for a typical size Scrum team, having one QA expert worked really well, and the rest of the development team also responsible for testing. But the person that was an expert at QA stuff and doing testing was always part of that team. That said, there's also been occasions where, and I'm not sure what people are meaning with integration, But from my standpoint, I have had where there were my Scrum team and another Scrum team were responsible for something, and they had to be integrated within two different parts of a product or two different products, in which case we would consider our stuff done and we would create new stories for the integration and making sure that integration worked. And that would be part of like a Scrum of Scrums.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if that's where people are coming from with integration, but that's.
No, those are really good topics. So internal sort of the two customers in this particular case is the two integrating pieces versus the bigger epic that's the total functionality. That's a good way of tracking it, actually. I like that. Thank you for that. Rohit, are you there?
Hello. Yeah. So I was just on. This is Rohit. I was just going into. So I'm just going into the discussion we're going on regarding integration team. So it's actually happening where I work at the moment. So we have a separate integration team. Obviously, it's more into the safe environment. They have a separate integration team, and we face a lot of challenges like this. Like, we had teams separated into component teams, and all our work product is basically a background product. It's not like a UI product. It's all like background functions and code and moving the files across. So we have big features, and then we had components, and there are like 3-4 teams in the safe train. They're working on separate components, and then we had an integration team. So how we are actually tackling this now is basically we merged the integration team with the teams, with the development teams, with QA and devs, and then we rather than they're doing one feature with separate components, we doing a feature teams. So one feature is done by one team, integration included. Their basically role is to finish that whole piece of work together, rather than 3-4 teams doing one feature with separate components, and then right at the end of the sprint or whenever they say, yeah, it's ready for integration test. Mm-hmm. So we are including the integration team right within mix of the dev teams with plus QA. They're working together. Like I think someone touched it, like one or two members are writing the scenarios for integration and writing all the automation framework, so that when that team is actually finishing the feature is ready to be integrated test as well, same time. So this is how we are trying it. Yeah, that's
a good strategy. I mean, I think the notions of handoffs, and if you think of that, we should create a vertical slice of functionality, have the team members that are necessary in order to do that. So I appreciate your comments. Let's see, Emily, you want to finish this, and we'll switch over to some of the questions that were put on Slido.
I'm a Scrum coach for our development team, and we are one team among several different that all work together on a singular product. And one thing that I think that we've actually gotten right is the testing. In terms of the agile mindset and all that. We do have 2 testers, and what we do is during a sprint, whenever a developer finishes a ticket, part of that ticket is to create unit tests for the work that they just accomplished. And then we have somebody else that's part of the development team actually run through those unit tests. And then at the end of the sprint, the testers will actually do basically regression tests, and they'll go through and make sure that not only did the feature get created the way it was supposed to and works the way it's supposed to, but also that it was fully integrated with the rest of the products and didn't end up breaking anything else. And so in this fashion, the testers are part of the team and they're outside of it. So this is one strategy that we've been using that I really like, and I really think that we're getting well.
Oh, well, good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I've seen that model work well. Do you find, just by the way, just the maturity of the team, the maturity of the testers? Do you have really competent testing people rotating in?
For the most part, I would say so. They're fairly new to the product, and there's a steep learning curve on it, so they're still kind of getting their feet wet, but they have jumped in enthusiastically, and they have learned a lot about the product, and they're knowledgeable about testing in general and software testing. So I think that they've been a huge asset to us.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So let's go ahead and look at some of the Slido questions that are up here. I know there's a couple new ones that just got posted, and typically we go for what got the most votes, but I'm going to go ahead and grab one of the new ones that's on here that I see on this list. The question is, as an Agile coach, what conversation should we have with our product owner who recently started working on an Agile team and are a little bit overwhelmed? Hendrik, do you want to take that on?
I'm not sure I fully understood the question. So there is a product owner on the team,
it's a product owner who just recently started on a team who feels it's too much to be a product owner. The reluctant and overwhelmed product owner.
Yeah, I think product owner is definitely one of those roles that are interpreted in so many ways. For example, in our company, I've seen it a number of times that the product owner is expected to do partly operational work. So they are sometimes having a tendency to take over some project management kind of roles and so on. And that can be really overwhelming. So my first question would be, what are actually expectations on this particular product owner? Because the word product owner is used here, but if it's so overwhelming, then I have the suspicion it's much more than understanding the customer, translating it into what the team should do, and discussing priorities and backlog. So that's my suspicion on this one.
Okay. Jörg, your microphone lit up right away. So what do you got?
Yeah, I feel like I've been there. So I've been in a situation where I had a product owner or pretty early where it wasn't really defined. So asking the expectation was similarly get that product shipped to the customer and make the customer happy. So I think the important thing is think about whom you can ask to support you. You are, for a lot of people at least in the organization, the product. So if they want to get the product out, they should be supporting you. So really trusting and leaving some things to be done by others instead of feeling you must do everything is highly important. One of the important things is really to enable the others to do things by directing. So the discussion, what are you really working on, and is it worth your time, or is somebody else maybe even better suited to do this, or at least as good, or at least trustworthy? So get things off your plate, because if you do crap, your product will be crap. Nobody will catch this one. If you are inconcise and don't talk to the customer correctly, probably nobody can help you. But if you say, I'm not really versed in technical discussions with the customer, yeah, immediately you will find somebody who joins you, or any other thing. So ask for help and don't think you must do everything. You have the authority to decide, and probably that's what's expected, but that doesn't mean perfect knowledge. Be humble.
Right. You surround yourself by the necessary experts in order to make the job work well. Somebody also just posted on the questions line here that I have a team that has 2 product owners. If that's 2 product owners for the same product, there needs to be some team working agreements established in order to understand who has what in the decision camp. It becomes important. Deanna, as you've been through your work, you've had to have hit the reluctant product owner in the past. What do you think?
So, the conversation goes so fast. There was some things that I wanted to say earlier that I'm going to just insert real quick before I answer your question, and that is, when that whole question around integration and stuff, made me think of the alternatives that are out there, like teams that do promiscuous pairing, where everybody's pairing with everybody else on the team.
This is a family show. Be careful.
Yes, please. I know. And testers are included in that pairing rotation. And then the other one, of course, is mob programming, where everything is happening as we go along. Test is being included, integration is happening, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so I just wanted to throw those out there as possible things that folks might want to take a look at, that there are some other ways of thinking about how to put the team together.
Sure.
In terms of reluctant product owners, I I feel like Jorg covered a lot of what I had to say there. Mostly what I find when I bump into someone who is, I'm in this role, I don't like this role, how do I get out of this role? Is that it's an overloaded role. Mm-hmm. And I have loved the concept of there's some new name for it now, I can't remember, that the three amigos, that it actually is, somebody who has a test perspective, somebody who has an engineering perspective, maybe the Scrum Master, and whoever has that product owner responsibility, that they actually work together very, in a very coordinated way, so that they are each getting the support and that what they need from the others. And I think that's one way to think about that. There's somebody who may have the job title product owner, but that doesn't mean that the entire role can be filled by just that one person, or right, like all the things that are loaded into it. And so I think that's one thing to think about. How it does this. I mean, of course, we're all seeing these days job descriptions for things like Scrum Master, product owner, and so on, that are like hardly recognizable to us as being what those roles actually, that different methodologies in Agile actually describe those roles, but that's maybe a different topic for a different day. Sure. And so, yeah, I think Jorg said exactly the thing. It's like coaching those folks to look for help in their system, and it depending on if it seems like something that could get some traction, renegotiating the role, right, making sure. And also the other way I've seen it overwhelming is when they've been assigned the role without the permission decisions that they need to be able to make. And that can be an extraordinarily frustrating position to be in. I mean, people are looking to you for decisions that based on the product vision, but they always have to go running back to their product manager before they can actually commit to anything for the team. So there's a lot of ways I've seen that go wrong, and it's just, on a case-by-case basis, it is, what is the thing that will work here to make this workable, manageable.
Right, and I think the empowerment is key, and I think that what you brought up earlier about a product owner doesn't have to be, as a concept, it doesn't have to be a single person. It can be, in fact, a product owner office. And I know that in my former life, we had 28 components coming together that needed to be managed. And no, it could not just be one person that can hold all of that in their head. It was just impossible. Let's see here. Emily, are you there? Do you have something to add to this?
I think that, for a lot of Agile teams, having one person wear multiple hats is sometimes the only way that they're able to function, but it can be problematic. And I think it's really, really important to remember which hat you're wearing at which point in time. For example, on my project, we don't have the funding or the personnel to have a product owner and a Scrum Master. So those roles are filled by the same person. And it can be difficult to remember that, right now in the daily Scrum, I am the Scrum Master and my job is to coach you through this, and it is not to ask detailed questions about what you're doing and why. So I think as coaches, it's really, really important for us to remember to be mindful of what we're doing and to be mindful of what the end result is that we're looking for.
Agreed. And I think that context, and I've been a manager, director in just different portions of my career, and I found myself that I always had to introduce myself in a conversation that I'm being Ray right now as this, or I'm being Ray right now as this, and I'm being Ray as the director of the organization, or I'm being Ray as just a peer, and we're just having a conversation about that, and just pretensing it so people had a better understanding of the perspective. And I think you agree with that. I think the best case I've seen of actually what mode am I in, it was for test-driven development. One of our engineers had created a hat that had 3 brims. One portion of it was red, one portion of it was blue, and the other one's green. And he could rotate that hat around to different brims that allowed everyone to know, hey, that's the mode he's in right now, which I thought was Absolutely awesome. Let's see. Sheila, are you there?
Yeah. So one of the things I want to say, as a coach, this overwhelmed product owner, I think the first step is to understand what is causing that, right? So it could be a training thing. It could be that the person is overwhelmed by not understanding some of the concepts of the role since they are a new product owner. It could be that the role is not clearly defined for them, which makes it, so before coming up with a solution, the main idea would be to get a little bit more detail into what is the most overwhelming thing, and then to come up with an action plan.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. But sometimes self-awareness, when you're given a role versus and you've never done it before, I think that is always the challenge. And I think for the Scrum Master, I assume it is a Scrum Master that's or an Agile coach in this case. I would spend a lot more time with this individual with just going over, these are the general way that product owner has been defined. If I had to make an assumption, if this person was handed, you're also now the product owner, it means that they probably also had another day job as well. That understanding of here's the list of my daily responsibility, my weekly responsibility, and my yearly responsibility, however those work out. Listing those out and seeing that as you added this another role to your life, is that realistic? Is there a work-life balance in there? And then, that negotiation that needs to kind of come through there. We are approaching the top of the hour. I'd like to thank the regulars. You could not do this show without you. We are currently right now in the process of looking at creating a business agility lab. For those of you who were at the Agile 2019, we had just a slew of people who came in, and we were just having these open sessions where we were talking about a subject and then just going into some deeper dives in each of those subjects around business agility. And so we're going to be doing that again. I still have to do some planning work before that gets put up on the Agile Alliance site, but look for that. For the people who were going to go to Agile 2020, something to note that there is going to be just a number of just different loose events that are going to be coming up. Go up to the website. You can find a bigger set of experience reports that are being posted up. The ones that were going to be a part of Agile 2019, those will be coming up online. Please go look at membership, because as an organization, majority of our funding per year came from that event, and we're not having it. So if you've been taking advantage of Agile Alliance resources, please go ahead and become a member, because that allows us to continue our work through these really weird times. And then other than that, I want you guys to have a really great month, and I look forward to this call next time. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.